Can you believe it was 2 years? Feels
Wow.
like yesterday. I know. And so it would be good to review that, and we can talk a little bit about, the impact to curriculum. I think that would be helpful for board members to hear.
Okay.
So, Mr. Walton, it's all you.
All right. So, and then Rachel, you had also asked that we include policy 6,000 concepts and roles in instruction.
I did just for review, but it didn't
Okay.
make the agenda that was posted. So,
Did it?
no,
I
that's
included,
okay.
I included 3 up there. I have it on mine, the one that I shared with everyone. I'm not sure.
Oh, was it shared out with everyone? Did everyone
Mhm.
receive that with three
It's-
items on the agenda? Okay. Okay,
Okay.
just for reference, again, just for
Okay.
reference, we can just talk about it. We're not,
Okay.
taking any action or anything on it.
That's
So,
true. That's true.
okay.
So I'm wondering if it would be good to share the equity and diversity policy and just try to level set and just maybe start from there and
Mhm.
have some discussion from there. And Rachel, I think I may need to follow your lead because I want to make sure I'm responding to. I know you had sent me something yesterday,
Mhm.
so I can certainly speak to some of those items.
Mhm.
Um, but I also want to make sure I'm understanding or addressing the challenges and questions from that day. But let me put this one up first. Oh, Rachel, did you go into the platform for the new policies? Oh, you did. Yes. So, Kara, I don't know if you've had time to look at it, but when you go on our website on the policies, all of the new policies are not in there, but this is us.
It's very exciting.
Yeah.
And you can copy and paste, and
This is our stuff.
Yes,
this is
this
our
is our.
stuff online.
Oh, this has been a long time coming.
I know. So a
Mhm.
lot of the policies are in there, but the ones that we've approved in the last year, CAVE just needs those, and then we will be caught up.
Okay.
But they put in all of the previously approved.
This committee was cruising for so long.
It's a pretty good
pandemic.
system, to navigate. Zeros, 1,000, 2,000,
Yeah.
3,000, and you just hit it, and there's the policy. It's pretty great, pretty cool. It's like,
Is
wait
this
a
what
minute.
Jen Gonzalez put together? She organized?
No,
No?
this is the, I'm sorry for the sidebar. I just thought everyone would want to see it. But this is remember when we went into contract with CAVE regarding the
Oh,
policy?
this was part of it. I didn't realize it.
Right, 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 right.
Right, sorry.
So from the link from here is the concepts and roles in instruction. And Rachel had asked me to include this, and there might be some opportunity for discussion here. So I just wanted to make sure I included that. But I'm going to go to the equity and diversity policy, and that's here. This is in a different format because CAVE is not including, like, again, the policies from like the last 2 years are not, all of those are not reflected in there yet. So that's why this format is a little different. So I believe this was December 2018. My good, I can't, 2019.
September of 2019.
My goodness. And so I think I'll just give everyone an opportunity to read this. And then,
Thank you.
you're welcome. And then once everyone is done with the paragraph, then I'll get to the bullets underneath, and I think it begins to impact our work more specifically.
And something I noticed on CABE's website is they have several updated versions.
Mhm.
If the committee has an appetite to revisit already and update some things, they also have a very lengthy explanation as to a district's equity and diversity policy. But something that caught my eye about this policy, that they said it should not be viewed as a remedial program intended to correct past wrongs. It is not about racial balancing, affirmative action, or special benefits to a particular group. It is about reaping the academic and educational benefits for all students that can flow from a diverse student body. And I believe they quoted Promoting Diversity in Your Schools by Arthur Coleman.
And I will scroll down so everyone can see the rest of the document.
Rachel, is that something that we can include in our policy, what you just read? Because that is important.
Yeah, we could. We definitely could.
It's something I know that we're not going to take action tonight, but it's something certainly to start the fall with, because we only make policy while, you know, the actual guts gets done after. So I think that this particular policy has to have some very strong language and parameters so that it does not get hijacked and used for a purpose that we don't believe in.
I read just something that was taken right from CABE, so maybe I could reword it so that, you know, we're more tailored to our
school district. Yes.
Okay. So it sounds like we could have a follow-up meeting and
yeah, doesn't have to, and certainly doesn't, you know, it's something for discussion this evening.
Yeah.
So Rachel, I know we had a conversation that started that evening at the board meeting in response to the POG. And I want to make sure my responses or anything that I say is kind of directly addressing any outstanding questions the committee might have. So can we just do it in that fashion? Because I think it might be cleaner for Karen and I just kind of respond to those things, and I think the committee can get a better understanding of the intentionality of the district behind this work and how the POG and some of this work is connected.
So I think the most pertinent question is, how will this help grow our students and close the achievement gap? It certainly widens the opportunity gap. But if you could talk more about that, that would be helpful.
So,
and how will it help the classroom teacher in teaching and learning? And again, we have spoken for the past 5 years about closing the achievement gap and fidelity to the curriculum, fidelity to the curriculum, fidelity to the curriculum. How does this close? And that's how we were going to close the achievement gap, by the fidelity to the curriculum that we approved. How is this going to help teaching and learning in that vein?
So can I ask a clarifying question? When you say this, do you mean the equity policy itself, or are you referring to
I'm talking about the portrait of a graduate. How is this going to help us close the achievement gap? How is this being introduced into the curriculum without parameters around it, how
Mhm.
is this going to help the teacher in the classroom close the achievement gap?
So,
Sure.
Kara, if you don't mind, I'd like to start and then you fill in with obviously the
Sure.
details that I know everyone's going to need. But I just want to remind everyone, like the POG itself is aspirational in nature, right? Like and serves as kind of a guide for the development of our curriculum, serves as a guide for the experiences we want students to have in our schools K-12, right? So this serves as a guide to help guide that practice. And so the next steps, once we've identified as a school community, these are the characteristics we want our graduates to have, period. Then we hand off the baton to, in this case, specifically, we're talking about curriculum. And so Kara and her team are beginning to think about its impact or implications on curriculum development. What does this mean for ordering supplies, right, to help realize the graduate that we want to produce? What does this mean for curriculum and experiences for kids if we're going to realize these characteristics that we approved? Right? And so it's connected certainly, but again, this serves as a guide to get us to those characteristics that we approved. I think what part of what we approved as a community, advocates, collaborators, communicators, innovators, and learners, as a community, we agreed these are the 5 characteristics we need to focus on for our kids to be ready for the challenges of the 21st century. And then Kara's team is going to put together those pieces, not to suggest the entire curriculum has to be turned upside down and started from scratch, but modify it to make sure that that these characteristics are going to be addressed and these experiences will be real for kids and find opportunities for kids to serve as advocates, for kids to serve as collaborators. Make sure we can find ways to assess our kids as communicators, find opportunities for kids to be innovators within the curriculum and experiences throughout the school day. And I think, as part of the vision for the 912 pathways, you probably can understand how that can be realized like immediately. And so, but again, like if this is pushing us to have experiences for kids at the 912 level, then these same characteristics push us to ensure kids have these experiences at 6-8. These characteristics also push us to make sure we have these same experiences for kids K-5, right? So it serves as a guide for our work district wide. And
But there
Kara,
are specific, I'm sorry,
no, go ahead, Rich.
there are specific next steps to POG. So can you talk to us more about those next steps?
Sure. So that evening, right? So there are 5 characteristics, and the portrait of the graduate itself. When this begins to live on a website somewhere, when we say what is the portrait of the graduate, people are going to see those 5 characteristics. That's what we're going to see. We're going to see mission, vision, 5 characteristics, and that kind of serves as our guiding light, right? The next steps of the portrait of the graduate speaks to, and I think this is part of the language that stirred the when we talk about the next steps, and we began to get feedback from Amy and some of the other board members. The next steps as part of the Bar Foundation was design at the margins. This was quite frankly, this was an opportunity only afforded to select school districts in the New England area. Danbury happened to be one of them. And so the Bar Foundation extended our grant to help support us to continue to develop our portrait of the graduate. And so, and Rachel, I'm sorry, Amy, let me just open up my screen so you can see me. And so because Amy had said to me in a conversation prior to our board meeting, Kevin, I don't recall a conversation about design at the margins. And that's absolutely true. And right, because the bigger group didn't hear about design at the margins because that's the next step of the work. That is not the development of the portrait of the graduate. So the Bar Foundation was already begin to introduce to districts, once you get your POG approved, this is the baton that will be waiting for you at the next step of the work. Hence the title, Design at the Margins, designing the next steps of the portrait. So if you're going to implement it, this is how you design experiences for kids at the margins, right? To make sure everyone is included as part of your portrait. So as an example, hey, Danbury, you did a great job identifying your 5 characteristics, but make sure when you design these experiences, Dr. Casimiro and team, make sure you are mindful of every single kid in Danbury, regardless of how they identify, regardless of their race or creed, regardless of, right? And so they're pushing all districts to be mindful of all of those things, regardless of the five or six characteristics they landed on.
And that includes all characteristics. I mean, students with disabilities, you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
special needs, all of that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Rachel. And those things are outlined in the board's policy as well. And, it talked about economics, about ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, religion. So all of those things, regardless of all of those things. And then also asking our curriculum team to be mindful of all of those things when ordering supplies, right? And so going back to the example when talking about, we want to make sure that our kids can see themselves in the curriculum, make sure they can see themselves in text that they read. So if we're going to embrace diversity, this happens to make sure all of my neighbors who live in Danbury, Black, white, Indian, whatever, everyone's kids is seeing each other in the text as a 7, 8, 9-year-old kid. And Karen and her team are doing an amazing job starting that work. And I'm sure she'll talk about, because she has a number of experiences to talk about. But this is the design of the margin work, like kind of the next phase of the work.
And that is a beautiful goal and a wonderful goal. And I think we certainly are on the path to doing that in all of our schools, especially in the elementary schools. But how do we stop it? What regulations are you going to write to this policy that it will not become a social justice program?
Now, when you say social justice program,
I
what does that mean?
I mean a social justice that we preach, that one race is bad and one race is good. That's what I mean by social justice.
Okay, so under no circumstance, right? And so and this is, I'm not trying to, I'm going to be supportive of all of our teachers. I'm just talking about the high school specifically right now. But our high school teachers, they're not professors at a university, right? So they don't necessarily get paid for their opinion and like bring their opinions to help sell a book or market themselves for their own greater good or for the university's greater good to try to bring more monies to the college. They have a curriculum to follow, and so that's right. And so our idea is to make sure our curriculum includes varying perspectives and viewpoints. I think that's something we want to embrace as a school community, but we don't leave space for someone to talk about some type of racial superiority like that's not part of a curriculum experience. And so if that's happened, if there are one-offs in our system where that's happening, then whether it's a principal, assistant principal, department head, someone will need to check that staff and bring them to their supervisor, whoever that might be. But under no circumstance would that be part of our design at the district level. That just would not be would not be part of our design.
And will you write regulations to this policy to assure parents of that?
Can I just ask a quick question? Is there language in the equity policy that feels problematic that might be prompting some of this conversation?
I just don't want it to get hijacked, that's all. The policy is fine, and I like the wording that's coming out of CABE too, to strengthen that policy, but we only make policy, Kate. The regulations have to come from the administration. And I want to be assured that this program is going to be as a successful one, and not one that can be interpreted differently by individuals.
So I'm going to just take a little stab at this for a second
I
because
know, it's an uncomfortable conversation.
it is,
and I get
it is.
And
And
I
I
get it.
want to be, and I think the elephant in the room a little bit here is that, social justice in and of itself is not a bad thing. Okay.
No.
And I say this, knowing that there's mixed feelings about and a perception about what social justice is. And from an education standpoint, um, educators, communities, we work hard to bring justice for all of our kids, right? Like that is something that I think that is a common quality that we all share. And when I say that, it's because I've know the work, the conversations, and the efforts that as a board and as a district we have put towards providing more equity towards our ESL populations, towards opening up open enrollment opportunities so that more kids can have access to the highest levels of opportunity in our district. And to make sure that we don't have any barriers in place that are preventing our kids from succeeding. And so,
Kara,
um,
sorry, I
yeah,
I don't typically interject, but what you just said is an example of social justice.
right.
And in my eyes, there are sentences throughout our policy that kind of claims our commitment to social justice. And Kathy, I think what I'm hearing from Kara is different from, me as a professor saying, maybe talking about my opinion about race or
Mhm.
race in our schools in our country would be different from what I'm hearing Kara talk about. I'm sorry, Kara, I'll stop talking.
No.
Or you will think this way, or there will be consequences.
Oh gosh, yes. And Kathy, and I think, I had a gentleman that wrote in, and he actually wrote into the board and as well, and had some pretty good dialogue about this. And so, the fear is not the equity. It's not
No, it's
removing
not.
barriers for folks. It's allowing a hateful ideology, an approach to an extreme viewpoint on something that takes the foundational principle and the value to a different level that
True.
is not what is intended or not what is wanted. And that is something, I know there's school districts that are the critical race theory that's the other elephant in the room here. That is in a timing wise, this is surfacing across the country. Um, Prior to this being brought up and to kind of the merging of these ideas, there wasn't an issue. We didn't have an issue with and concern about that. There was nothing that surfaced on that came to my desk that there was an issue with any teachers or staff members that were portraying anything other than the values that we have agreed on. Our social studies teachers, our humanities teachers work extraordinarily diligently to check their bias at the door and to make sure that students are understand how to have these conversations, because these conversations they make their way into the classroom no matter what happens. That we especially in the politically charged climate that we have right now. And so the teacher's job is to provide a critical framework with which to think about these problems and with which to negotiate and have conversations about them that
Yes.
don't become polarizing, that become logical, fact-based. We teach kids how to build arguments to support them with facts and reasoning. Part of our feedback to teachers, particularly in the humanities, when we're observing, is if something isn't falls out of line with any of those things. So we do teach students how to think from a disciplinary standpoint. We don't teach ideologies whatsoever. There's just no room for personal ideologies in the curriculum, but we do provide frameworks for students to have discourse and to dialogue. I know there's great worry about sort of all these extreme viewpoints on both sides. And, unfortunately, we are in a very politically charged time of, very, I'm going to use the word polarizing again, opinions about things. And so
We don't want to have our students hurt in the
correct,
process. So,
absolutely.
no shaming or anything like that.
Correct. So how do I've witnessed many adults who cannot have a mature conversation about these topics. And our goal is to teach kids how to approach difficult conversations because they're there, and to do it respectfully, to do it diligently, to understand the give and take, and to how to logically problem solve around these things, and to respect opinions, agree to disagree, move forward. And to recognize that because we have so much diversity, our words, everything that we say has a lot of meaning and thought, to all the students that are sitting in the class at all times. And that kind of gets to the culturally relevant piece as well, which is particularly important with this. And that is that, and we talk about, they mentioned the designing in the margins. And that was something, again, that Bar, initiated. But the takeaway from designing in the margins, to me, means that when you're considering who's in front of you in that classroom and in that space, and then when you're planning your lessons, it is inclusive of the students and the experiences that are in front of you. And every class is different. And so by design, you approach your lesson with a due diligence that speaks to as many of those children in that classroom at any one time. Think about planning a birthday party for your kids, and there's 15 little girls that are coming to your house, and one of them is one of them can't have is gluten intolerant, another one has something else, right? So when you plan that menu, how do you plan it so that it's inclusive of everybody without making anybody feel like they're different or have to pack a lunch or do something like that, right? But that you can achieve the same means and same goals, but by planning and thinking through things differently that encompasses all the kids in the classroom. And that's what it's really about. It requires you, a teacher, knowing their students very deeply. A lot of the work, Kevin mentioned, and you guys could cut me off at any time. I tend to.
Kara, well,
Yeah.
I just want to feed your feedback a little bit, because in order for our teachers to be able to do that, we also want to provide professional development to them, so we can have these classrooms that value each person as an individual. But our staff, right? We may need to provide professional development for them so they can provide this climate, this classroom climate where all kids can be successful. So I just want to make sure that the PD piece and the curriculum piece, because they do live together, right? They are intertwined in this work.
And that's all I'm asking. I'm only asking that you are aware and that you will build, and you will build it so it happens the way that you are speaking to us today. And and put in assurances into the policy, because we can only do a broad policy. That's only our job.
Sure. So just to give you a quick scope of kind of where what the next steps are. So we are going to be engaging in the fall with, now we kind of get down to, we had this massive stakeholder engagement for a very extended period of time, and we really gathered a lot of feedback. We came up with those broad buckets and the outcomes that we want to see related to those. But those, from a teaching standpoint, from a curricular standpoint, those are too broad to create any meaningful experiences yet for kids. These are the major outcomes. So those buckets then need to be taken down to the 9-12 level, the 6-8 level, the K-5 level, right? We already have requirements and standards that we have to follow. We've got NGSS, we have ESPA, we have ISTE, we have health and wellness, we have Common Core, we have everything. Those are kind of non-negotiables. Like, that's embedded in the work that we do. But when you're talking about, and I grab my buckets here, being an advocate, a collaborator, a communicator, an innovator, and a learner, what does it mean? So as a collaborator, I'm reading, students will work with diverse team members with respect divergent thinking. Students will assume shared responsibility and work independently to accomplish goals. The work then of the curriculum folks and of the teachers is to begin a process, once we create rubrics that flesh out what a communicator looks like, or a collaborator at the 9-12 level, what that looks like at the 6-8 level, and what does that look like at K-5? What does it mean to communicate at these levels? Once we flesh out and detail those rubrics out, we then take that information, we go back into our curriculum, and we say, okay, where do we give kids opportunities to communicate and to collaborate? Where are those experiences in the curriculum? And we do an asset mapping activity. And we look at, we have a lot of this here, but we don't have enough of it here. How do we build up these units? How do we improve these materials to make sure that we're giving opportunities? How do we build assessments that require more communication and collaboration, or that require more discourse where we give kids rubrics to give each other feedback on their thinking and reflection, right? And so we're constantly giving students feedback on these things. Many of the items that are in the buckets are much softer items. It's not an English standard or a mathematic or an algebraic standard that you're trying to master. You're talking about a way of doing and interacting and persisting that go above and transcends the actual hard academic standards that we all have to follow. There's a lot of professional development and training that's needed to coach students in that direction. And it's going to take a lot of time, effort, and work to embellish our curriculum to make sure that we have a balanced approach, that we're providing those opportunities all along a continuum. So that by the time you graduate, that's the outcome piece, that you've had multiple experiences along the way to get to this outcome. And that's what we have to do. And that's deep down, roll up your sleeves work in the curriculum over time, where we continue to improve and evolve what it is that we're doing. The culturally relevant piece says that while we're doing that, we have all of our kids in mind to meet their needs. We added just before the pandemic, we had started some work in this area, and we had revised some of our curriculum rubrics to include a culturally responsive component. So whether we're actually writing our own curriculum or we're purchasing a program, but one of the components in it is that it had to reflect diversity of characters, race, abilities, ethnicity, religion, sexual orientation, family structures. It reflects portrayals of people of diverse races, genders, abilities, and sexual orientation using an asset-based perspective, right? So that, yes, you can have a handicapped child that's a hero in a story in your books, right? And that it's not always the same typical players in the books that children read. And it connects real learning to life. And this is way bigger than just the materials that we're ordering. This becomes the culture and the way that we enact and connect teaching and learning with kids in the classroom. It's got a lot of coaching, there's a lot of professional training, and there's a lot of work in our curriculum that lies ahead.
Just want you to write the regulations so that the teachers in the classroom understand the purpose. That's all.
Sure.
And that it doesn't open a window, in a different direction,
Yes, because the work, I understand the work, and I understand how great it is and how wonderful it will be for children. I get it. But I just want the regulations to show that you mean it. That's all.
Kara, in terms of the conversation you were talking about, the support that we need to do, to help our teachers get trained on, how they do this, right? There's no tactful way to ask this question, but in terms of our budget, we don't have a lot of wiggle room to be able to do this. So, is there a plan, or are you guys working on a plan, and how can we support that, and how can we help, make that a reality given our situation?
Sure. So, a lot of the work that we have, and a lot of most of our, so I'll use next year for an example. We have a couple of days at the beginning of the school year that we usually utilize for a variety of large initiatives, mostly curriculum rollouts and any kind of new district things, moving to a new program or whatever. So, but during the year, and this is one of the reasons why those release days are so critical, is it's an extended, and so I brought the big PDs at the beginning because sometimes those can be big one and done curricular events, professional learning events, right? But what we're trying to achieve with this is to get to that culture. You can't change culture by changing the culture. Well, I'm going to change the culture overnight. You change culture by changing your practices. And practices over time turn into your culture. What becomes expected and inspected becomes your practices, which becomes your culture. So you have to routinize it in what you're doing. Okay. Our department heads, our supervisors, our building administrators will have to lead by example and embed this work in everything they do. There's no one big professional development session or two or three that gets to the bottom of this. There'll be a couple to kick off, but then you have to model this 24/7. It happens in the way that we look at data and what we choose to look at and what we communicate and what we say we want to set our goals around. We've been doing a lot of that work actually, Kate, for quite a while when it comes to digging into things. The state has engaged in that work. Our accountability index has been backed into making sure that we're shoring up gaps and providing more opportunities. A lot of the genesis for the academies has been built upon the fact that we could do better for kids, and we could provide more for our kids in addition to, right? Those are more opportunities. So, the work is ongoing. There's no one book that we could read together that's going to do this. It's going, or one big professional session. It's ongoing modeling of the expectations for how we interact with kids, small slices of professional development and learning over time, and then the deliberate and intentional modification of curricular activities and experiences for kids that teachers have their hands on and are part of building so that they are invested in and understand how to deliver it in the classroom.
And Kate, thanks for asking that question, because in addition to everything Kara said, if we're going to embed this work as part of the culture, part of some of the initial plans, when we're all back in school again, which will be really soon, is to make sure these practices are embedded into everything that we do, like Kara said. And so some of our initial plans was to provide, training and professional development for everyone who sits on our IDT meetings, for everyone who sits on our district data teams, everyone who sits on our school data teams. And then the idea is, and so, I'm looking at the language in the policy right now. The district will actively seek and analyze relevant disaggregated data through an equity lens and use the data to explicitly identify and address disparities in educational outcomes. Now, to Kara's point, this is work the district had been doing already anyway. However, if we're going to be more intentional about this work, we might have different people at the table. We might have, different teachers at the table. We might have parents at the table. We might have students at the table. We might have community at the table, because we want to be inclusive in this work. We want to be transparent in this work. And we want to, if we're going to explicitly identify and address disparities, we want to make sure that those groups are represented. Right. And so these are the processes that we will be further investigating and find out the best way to approach this work. But once we identify the people, then we're going to need to provide at the very least, those groups of professional development to begin to look at this work a little differently. And certainly, the district has a data-wise culture that's already embedded in the Danbury community. The lens might need to be widened a little bit, just being mindful of this policy and this focus. But again, to Kara's point, we feel strongly that we can embed this as part of the culture in Danbury, like as in this is the way we do things here in Danbury. And so, the line in the policy is already there. Again, it's really just piggybacking on the work we've already done and just being more intentional about the work. And then I'm also seeing in 1 through 8 to fulfill this, Danbury Public Schools will. And then one of the statements, it speaks to number 6, provide professional development to teaching staff specifically designed to strengthen employees' knowledge and skills for eliminating opportunity and achievement gaps between groups of students, right? And so, one of the first questions I heard when we started the meeting this evening is, how will this work impact achievement gaps and opportunity gaps? And so being more intentional about this work, providing professional development for staff, and so in some of these conversations, it could be about addressing the biases that we bring to the classroom that Kara had mentioned earlier. This district has engaged in a process of detracking our school district, right? So that specifically talks about, practices that served as barriers for kids to achieve in this district, right? And so the district has already engaged in these types of practices. This is continuing to look at those barriers to make sure all of our kids can succeed, right? Regardless of, right, economics, ethnicity, family mobility, language, etc. So, it's important if we're going to realize the goals outlined in this plan, professional development and continuing to look at curriculum is going to be critical for us. But we feel like we can do it. We've already done it. We just wanted to be a little bit more intentional about the work to make sure that we can meet the goals outlined in this plan. And then as we move forward with the POG, it begins to impact curriculum more than necessarily this policy, but will also potentially impact professional development as well. And I think it's all nicely connected, quite frankly.
And so Kevin, how will you track the goals? How will the board know that the goals are being met?
Right. And so Kathy, I think the goals, right? And so I think we need to back out again because portrait of the graduate aspirational in nature, that's driving the development of curriculum, driving the development of professional development. And so the goals could be in a number of different buckets. It could be goals around student outcomes. It could be goals around, around climate. It could be goals around attendance. It could be goals around, is this improving relationships with kids and teachers? And so it would really be about identifying what those goals are for us, in the immediate future, Kathy. But and I'm sorry, I'm not answering because it's kind of broad. When we're talking about the POG and we're talking about the policy, we're talking about curriculum implementation. But I do recall at the board meeting, when talking about the curriculum work and professional development work, I think quite frankly, all of us would be happy to provide, updates for the board and the community about our work as it relates to the POG work. I think that's a more than reasonable ask. And quite frankly, I think it would be important for us, given the community's commitment to the development of the POG, to continue to provide updates. And so, perhaps we can, associate some goals with that in terms of, some benchmarks that we would like to realize
Yes.
to help realize some of the commitments we make. But some of those commitments haven't even been identified yet because we're just passing the baton of finishing the 5 characteristics and beginning to understand what this means for professional development, for curriculum development, etc.
So we do intend to, as we develop those continuation rubrics, and those are fleshed out, K5, 6, 8, 9, 12, to provide so that we give students feedback. Once those get fleshed out in more detail, that the goal is to give students feedback on how they're doing with these things. Because you can't get better at it unless you're getting feedback on what it is that you're doing or not doing or where your areas for growth are. We also have in the new graduation requirements, the mastery-based credit. And so once we kind of get to that academy model and that's fully realized, the mastery-based credit will be kind of an amalgamation and a pinnacle of all of those categories. A student has opportunity to demonstrate through a personalized mastery-based project the characters and the attributes, but through the lens of the project that they choose. But along the way, our job is to provide as many opportunities and experiences to practice those things that we're saying are part of the continuum. So if you picture little staircases to get to 12th grade, you're not suddenly going to make a leap to be a great communicator if we're not providing experiences along the way in elementary school and middle school for you to practice those skills and to collaborate and to communicate with your peers and to test that out and get feedback on it and to have some assessments along the way that speak to that. So there are ways to assess that. And our initial thinking is that we do that through the development of a portfolio over time where we give kids feedback, periodic feedback in those areas. But then also through, by the nature of, if there's a unit in social studies that really highlights the high leverage POG skills in there, our communication and collaboration, or there's an opportunity for advocacy, and there's work in there that we're able to say, okay, students in 8th grade generally did well in this unit. This is how many kids need support or not, or we provide more experiences. But, to Kevin's point, the buckets themselves are very broad. It's not until we start to get down to more detailed continuum rubrics that define what those experiences are, and then take those and say, okay, here's where they live in unit 2 in grade 7 in social studies class. And identify where those are. So, but that's ongoing work. That's work that has to be part of the curriculum cycle as we go forward. That has to be ongoing learning. That's aligned to that as well. So it's creating an alignment in the system with the goal in mind of the portrait of as the outcome.
I think the quarterly updates were a positive, kind of a solution for concerns and thoughts of board members. So I look forward to those, and I really appreciate the conversation that we're having this evening. I know it's not easy. Does anybody else have any questions or thoughts before I wrap this up?
No, but just thank you very much. I know it's a very uncomfortable conversation, but I do appreciate the honesty and I agree with the POG work. I'm
Mhm.
just a little concerned on what detour it may take. That's all.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think you're not alone, Kathy. You know, as you know, from the public as well, there were concerns.
Yes.
But and throughout all, you know, a lot of our policy is to include that policy 6000 specifically for the sentence that says instruction shall be based upon a process that establishes a climate that continually affirms the worth of all students. It shall reflect research-based, I'm not going to say this properly, pedagogical practices, promote respect for diversity, and maintain the expectation that all students will perform at high levels.
That's it.
Yeah, that's
Amen.
instruction. That's our instruction policy.
Yep.
I mean, there are others in our mission and goals and objectives. There's non-discrimination. There's,
Yep.
you know, that policy 6000 was me not getting carried away with, you know, bogging you down with too many policies. But
It was a good one to pull.
yeah,
It really was.
yeah. I mean, we could introduce a non-discrimination in the instructional program, but I don't want it to, you know, overburden us with so many policies either. But
Right.
I can rework the that sentence that you liked, Kathy, that I pulled from the CABE explanation for an equity and diversity policy, and maybe we can include that in like a preclude or something
In our next meeting, right?
in our next meeting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the conversation.
Yes, me too. Thanks, everyone. If nothing
welcome.
else, did you have something? Sorry, Mr. Walston, I feel
No,
like
no, I
I
was just saying.
cut you off 1,000 times.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Yes,
night.
If
thank you
anyone has
all.
any questions at all, anytime, you could always call me and, you know, like to chat.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Motion to adjourn, I guess.
Yep.
So moved.
Moved by Kate, seconded by Kathy. All in favor. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Rachel.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Kathy. Good night, Amy.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Bye. Night, Kate.